and ask yourself, do I want better? If the answer is yes, I'll see you here tomorrow. And I promise you, I will do everything in my power to get you to college and to a better life.
Hello, listeners, and directly Mr. G. I am Nathaniel Vipond, and this is the Vipond Vibe. I was tasked with making a podcast for my final project, the Leadership 20 class, and you are listening to it, so I thank you. This episode, we will be looking at Coach Ken Carter, who is widely known as the coach in the movie Coach Carter, but some don't know is based on a true story, where Coach Carter led his team to an undefeated season, then locked his team out of the gym when his players failed to meet his requirements, which his players signed to do. We will talk about that more later, though. I chose Coach Carter for this assignment because I view him as an inspirational leader, and he led his team really well. Let's get into it.
Just say a little prayer, get your money, man. Life goes
I'm
on.
hopeful, yes I am hopeful for today. Take this music and use it, let it take you away. And be hopeful, and he'll make a way. I know it ain't easy, but that's okay, cause we hopeful.
I'm going to start you off with some background and information. The story takes place in 1999 at Richmond High School, California. The city, historically plagued with high crime rates, economic depression, and an underfunded school system, was suffering. The graduation rate for male athletes from Richmond was abysmal, about 15%. Ken Carter, the all-time scoring and assist leader for Richmond, was asked to coach the basketball team after a failed season. Carter refused to coach until every player and parent or guardian signed a 15-page contract. The requirements? Realistically, not too much to ask. Athletes must hold a 2.3 grade point average, or GPA, which is equivalent to a 77% average or higher. Players must sit in the front row of classes and attend class every day. Players must wear a dress shirt and tie on game days. And they must have a culture of respect, such as addressing coach, teammates, referees, and opponents as Sir or Mr., having no inappropriate language, especially the N-word, because it's seen as a derogatory term against black people. Initially, the parents and players did not agree, until they realized that there would not be a basketball team unless the papers were signed. For the first 13 games after signing, it worked. The team boasted a 13-0 record, but then Carter got word that players were skipping class, not holding a 2.3 GPA, and failing to submit homework. Upon hearing this, Carter immediately put a padlock on the gym used to practice. He gave his players a choice: either keep your grades up and follow the rules, and they can play, or give up the season, go back to their old ways, likely not graduate, and don't play basketball. Instead of practices, he held study sessions in the library. He forfeited games until players met the GPA requirements. Carter's lockout lasted 8 days. While the public saw a stubborn coach, Carter's willingness to risk his career highlighted the distinct leadership qualities, such as fierce accountability and a clear vision, that defined his coaching philosophy. To start my leadership analysis, I'll talk about his accountability. Carter set firm expectations through the contracts. He refused to compromise on them, famously saying that 1% of kids make it to the NBA, but 100% of kids will need to read, write, and be able to do maths. It didn't matter if you were the star player or the last person on that bench, you were to meet his requirements. When players failed to meet requirements, he locked them out. He held them accountable, proving that he was serious. He required signatures from both players and parents, a pact made when signed. When he enforced the lockout, he wasn't being a tyrant monster. He was enforcing terms to make athletes better students as long as being better people. You may be asking, how did this help the athletes? Well, for all 5 years he coached at Richmond, 100% of students he coached graduated high school. And in 1999, the year that made him famous and the year the movie's from, all 15 players graduated high school and attended college. This incredible academic success was only possible because Carter looked past the immediate basketball season and focused on a grander mindset, a trait that defined him as a visionary leader. Next, I'll talk about visionary leadership. Most leaders, coaches in this case, focus on the current, winning games. Carter focused on the future, seeing the Richmond kids graduate and be successful in life. His 2.3 GPA requirement wasn't just a random number. It was the required GPA to qualify for athletic scholarships for the NCAA. Making players sit in the front row wasn't just about paying attention in class, it also forced the students to participate in class discussions and activities. Carter also wanted the kids to have greater self-expectations. While the public saw Richmond as nothing but a crime-ridden city with an underfunded school and low graduation rate, Carter wanted his athletes to see greater, to exceed in life beyond high school. He refused to see the public narrative of at-risk youths. Another thing that fits into this section is changing the crowd's view from short-term to long-term. Instead of fans just wanting to win the next game, keep the winning streak alive, Carter, along with help from his team, made them focus on wanting the next generation to graduate, to succeed. Having a vision for a better future is easy, but fighting for it when the entire community hates you requires serious guts. His vision required moral courage to survive the backlash. Carter had his morals. His morals made him battle not executives, not enemies, but they made him battle the parents of the players he loved and believed in more than anyone else. Carter was accused of stealing games when he locked the team out. He was booed everywhere he went. He got angry calls every night from parents. He faced threats of violence and vandalism. A brick was even thrown through a window of a sporting goods shop he owned. The public hated him, but he stood alone. He stood his ground until the school board voted to cut the chains off the doors. He went in the next day, intending to quit being the coach of the team. But when he walked into the empty gym, the players weren't in there. They joined his side. They were in the library, studying, fulfilling the contracts they signed. His morals included willingness to be the villain instead of viewing himself as the victim. He didn't care how the public viewed him. He wanted the kids to succeed. The chains were staying on the gym until all 15 of his players followed the contract. He was also a transformational leader. This means he wanted to transform the players into better people. He was not dictatorial in his leadership. He wanted to alter his players' mindsets and self-images. He went beyond simple rewards and punishments. He changed the athletes' goals, beliefs, and values. He embodied the change of the players, from young black athletes into young black men who wanted more to just impress their friends and girls. Carter showed them what success looked like. He grew up the same way they did, but he took the good path. He graduated, went to college, all of that. He showed them that success was better than jail. He made the team a brotherhood by showing them that the tournament wasn't for a trophy, it was for the freedom, their families. He made them look at the bigger picture. Carter also challenged the status quo. He changed expectations not from the public, but from the team's very own players. Carter challenged his players physically, but he challenged them even harder mentally. He made them solve their own academic problems. He took their work ethic from basketball and applied it to their schoolwork. The definitive proof of transformational leadership is that the players ultimately became leaders themselves. When the school board cut off the chains off the gym doors, Carter's structural authority was gone. It had been a purely authoritarian leader. If he had been a purely authoritarian leader, the kids would have happily run back onto the court. But because he had transformed them, they chose to stay in the library. They had adopted his values as their own. They took ownership of their destiny, proving that Carter hadn't just changed a basketball program. He had fundamentally changed who they were. Carter also led from the front. When a leader leads from the front, they take the distance between themselves and their followers away. They get up close and personal with them. Instead of a do as I say, not as I do mentality, Carter had a completely different one. Do as I did and turn out like me. He put his own blood, sweat, and tears into the same game on the same floors as the athletes he coached. He knew exactly what they were going through. He put his own effort into helping them outside of the game. When he locked the gym, he wasn't sitting at home watching TV. He was in the library. Helping the kids learn and get their GPAs to an acceptable place. He used his own money to pay for tutors and help for the students, as the school system was too poor to use their own money. He put the same hours that the kids put in. When Carter's own son, Damien, transferred to Richmond, everyone thought he would get special treatment. But Carter was a leader from the front. He gave his own son the same treatment that every other athlete on that team got. When Damien was late, he ran laps and suicides, just like every other player. He held his own son to the same standards as all the kids from the place where he grew up. Damien was a smart kid, his GPA well above what was needed to play under his father. But Damien still had to sit in that library with all the kids who didn't meet his dad's standards. Carter also modeled the professionalism that he demanded. He didn't make the kids call everyone sir or mister and wear dress shirts and ties while he was roaming around in sweatpants. He was wearing the same professional attire every day. He addressed every teen on the team as sir because it was a sign of respect. He didn't ask for any effort from the players that he himself wasn't already giving them, setting a benchmark for various leadership styles he used with his players. Speaking of leadership styles, while leading from the front was crucial, Ken Carter's success at Richmond High School stemmed from his ability to masterfully blend seemingly contradicting leadership styles, adapting his approach to meet the evolving need of his players and the demands of the crisis at hand. At the outset of his tenure, he relied heavily on an autocratic and commanding style to break a toxic culture of low expectations, using absolute authority to mandate his famous 15-page contracts, enforce strict dress codes, and ultimately padlock the gym doors without seeking permission or consensus. However, this rigid discipline was never meant to be punitive. Rather, it served as the ironclad framework for his authoritative and visionary leadership, which constantly illuminated a bigger picture from the young men by connecting daily academic rigor to the ultimate goal of college graduation and long-term life success. Simultaneously, Carter practiced pace-setting leadership by leading from the front, personally modeling the flawless professionalism, respect, and relentless work ethic he demanded by wearing tailored suits every day and sitting in the library alongside his players during the lockout. As the team's culture shifted, his style naturally transitioned into an affiliative and coaching approach, wherein he acted as a deeply empathetic mentor who provided individualized consideration, helping each player navigate personal trauma, financial aid, and college applications. Ultimately, the profound impact of his faceted approach was proven when his tip-top authority was stripped down by the school board, yet the players chose a democratic and participative path, collectively deciding to stay in the library and study. By fluidly shifting from a strict disciplinarian to an inspiring visionary, an exemplary role model, and a supportive coach, Carter demonstrated that true leadership is situational, transforming his players from compliant athletes into independent, accountable leaders of their own lives. Personal factors leading to Carter's leadership. Ken Carter's unique, uncompromising brand of leadership was deeply rooted in his own personal upbringing, family dynamics, and individual achievements. Growing up in a massive household as one of 9 children under the roof of deeply resilient parents, Carter learned the values of discipline, active listening, and structural order at an early age. Despite his father dropping out of school after the 1st grade and his mother after the 6th, his parents enforced a non-negotiable rule that education was the family's top priority, a strategy that successfully propelled all 9 siblings into college. The first-hand proof that academic focus could break the cycle of poverty gave Carter an unshakable conviction when demanding excellence from his own players. Furthermore, his status as an alumnus of the Richmond High, where he set all-time school records for scoring and assists, gave him immense exceptional authority. The players knew he had walked the exact same halls and mastered the exact same basketball court. This athletic credibility, combined with his success as a wealthy, independent local businessman who owned several community enterprises, transformed his coaching style. Because he did not rely on the school district for his livelihood, he possessed the financial and professional freedom to make highly controversial decisions, such as the famous lockout, without fear of administrative retaliation. Finally, as a father who held his own son, Damien, to an even stricter standard than the rest of the roster, Carter modeled a transparent, flaw-free accountability that proved his discipline was born of parental love and protection rather than ego. Social factors leading to Carter's leadership. The social realities of Richmond, California in the late 1990s served as a critical catalyst for Carter's defensive and highly structured leadership style. Carter frequently referenced the proverb that it takes a village to raise a child, but he quickly realized that the traditional social safety net for his players had completely disintegrated, evidenced by the fact that only 7 out of 45 young men in his basketball program lived in two-parent households. Recognizing the severe lack of domestic structure, Carter designed his 15-page contracts and strict rules to artificially recreate a cohesive, protective village that could shape these young men from negative social influences. He was also highly conscious of stereotype threat, a psychological and social phenomenon where minority youth from impoverished urban environments internalize low societal expectations and live down to them. To combat a system that statistically favored the incarceration of young black men over their higher education, Carter used his leadership to wage war on these urban stereotypes, mandating that his players wear shirts and ties on game days and sit in the front row of every classroom to break their anonymity. By treating his players as a countercultural social unit, he weaponized positive peer pressure to insulate the boys from the surrounding streets, gangs, and drug culture, ultimately rebelling against a perverse sports economy that comfortably exploited young athletes for Friday night entertainment while abandoning them to systematic failure from Monday to Friday. Cultural factors leading to Carter's leadership. Carter's leadership philosophy was heavily shaped by a clash between the traditional values and his heritage, and the evolving youth culture of the late 20th century. Born and partially raised in the American South, Carter was deeply immersed in a traditional Southern black culture that prioritized faith, family honor, and an absolute reverence for elders and authority figures. This heritage directly inspires his mandate that players address him, teachers, and one another as Sir or Mister, a practice meant to restore a sense of dignity and mutual respect that had largely eroded in modern urban environments. Having played high school sports in the mid-70s, Carter belonged to a generational subculture that viewed athletics strictly as a vehicle for academic advancement and racial liberation, rather than an end in itself. When he returned to Richmond in 1997, he found a sports culture that coddled athletes solely for their physical talents while enabling academic laziness. Simultaneously, the rise of late 90s hip-hop and street culture had popularized a casual, anti-authoritative posture and normalized derogatory language, which Carter fiercely pushed back against by banning the N-word in his gymnasium. He recognized that his players were trapped in a subculture of sports anti-intellectualism where being an athlete was prized but being a scholar was stigmatized. By blending the uncompromising meritocracy of his corporate business background with traditional respect politics, Carter successfully shifted the culture of Richmond High basketball, making academic intelligence the ultimate prerequisite for athletic prestige. Environmental factors leading to Carter's leadership. The physical and structural environments Ken Carter inhabited throughout his life dictated the specific boundaries and methods of his leadership. His earliest environmental influence came from working on his family's rural farm in Mississippi Delta, a rigorous landscape where nature accepted no excuses and survival required early mornings and rigorous daily labor. This This environment instilled in Carter a mathematical understanding of cause and effect, which he later applied to his coaching by treating both the hardwood and classroom as fields that required immense preparation before yielding a harvest. When managing the underfunded, resource-scarce environment of Richmond High School, a school deeply impacted by local industrial decline, pollution, and high neighborhood crime rates, Carter refused to adopt the environmental defeatism common among educators who lowered standards out of pity for the students' harsh home lives. Instead, he treated the physical boundaries of the gymnasium as a sanctuary. Outside the gym doors lay an unpredictable and chaotic city, but inside everything was orderly, safe, and immaculate. During the 1999 lockout, Carter brilliantly used the built environment of the school to force a psychological shift, padlocking the high-stimulus, crowd-validated space of the gym and isolating his players inside the quiet, resource-rich school library. By introducing his players to the formal, structured physical environments of the corporate boardroom and the academic library, Carter effectively disrupted the sensory habits of the streets, physically mapping out the path his students would need to traverse to survive in universities and professional workspaces. Historical factors leading to Carter's leadership. Ken Carter's internal leadership compass was fundamentally calibrated by the macro-historical eras he lived through, spanning from the civil rights struggles of his youth to the corporate restructuring movements of the late 20th century. Coming of age during the height of the civil rights movement and the intense era of public school desegregation, Carter belongs to a generation that viewed access to a quality education not merely as a routine, bureaucratic step, but as a hard-won constitutional right and a vital tool for racial emancipation. This historical backdrop made him view academic negligence as an insult to the ancestors who fought for integration, driving his fierce tolerance for skipped classes or low grade point averages. As he transitioned into adulthood, the 1980s and 90s brought devastating historical shifts to the San Francisco Bay Area, where rapid deindustrialization shuttered local shipyards and factories, leaving mass unemployment that directly coincided with the destructive crack cocaine epidemic and the subsequent war on drugs. Carter stepped into the Richmond head coaching job fully aware of these grim historical realities. He knew the local juvenile justice system was a highly efficient pipeline for young minority men who fell behind academically. Consequently, his high-stakes leadership style treated a dropped GPA as a life-or-death emergency rather than a minor athletic infraction. Furthermore, by dropping his businesses during the 1990s corporate accountability movement, which popularized data-driven metrics and strict performance standards, Carter historically modernized the role of a high school coach, transforming his team into a hyper-accountable organization governed by formal, written contracts designed to prepare his players for a competitive global economy. Mistakes and flaws. Ken Carter's rigid approach to leadership, while undeniably effective in its ultimate outcome, was marked by distinct strategic mistakes, systematic communication breakdowns, and a dogmatic inflexibility that often prioritized absolute compliance over organizational harmony and stakeholder alignment. His primary and most controversial mistake was the implementation of severe collective punishment during the January 1999 academic lockout, wherein he penalized the entire 15-man roster, including high-performing student athletes like his own son Damien Carter and future NFL tight end Courtney Anderson, both of whom had fully honored the contracts, attended every class, and maintained exemplary grade point averages well above the mandated 2.3 threshold. In the realm of organizational management and behavioral psychology, punishing the innocent alongside the struggling in an exceptionally high-risk gamble that can instantly shatter morale, breed deep-seated cynicism, and alienate the very top performers a leader relies upon to sustain institutional standards. By forcing these academically diligent students to forfeit crucial undefeated games and lose vital exposure to college scouts, Carter inadvertently sent a confusing message. The individual accountability and personal excellence could still be overridden by the failures of the collective group. This sweeping enforcement of penalties risks breaking the foundational trust required for transformational leadership, substituting a nuanced understanding of equity with a blunt, indiscriminate application of equality that initially caused immense psychological distress and resentment among his most loyal players. Beyond the internal mechanics of the team, Carter suffered from a severe my way or the highway communication flaw that completely bypassed the broader educational ecosystem of Richmond High. By suddenly padlocking the gymnasium doors and chaining the turnstiles without any prior consultation, upstream warning, or strategic collaboration with the principal, the school board, the faculty, or the parents, he created an immediate information vacuum. This lack of systematic alignment instantly escalated what should have been a structured internal academic intervention into a hostile, highly volatile public confrontation and a sensationalized national media circus. Because the faculty members were entirely left out of the loop, many teachers felt that Carter was overstepping his athletic boundaries and encroaching upon their professional domain, using their grading books as leverage for his personal crusade without showing respect for their classroom autonomy. Furthermore, by failing to establish a proactive, collaborative early warning system with the parents weeks in advance as the team's collective GPAs began to slip, Carter stripped the families of their agency. Furious parents, who were relying on their sons' athletic talents to secure college scholarships that they otherwise could not afford, suddenly found their child's futures jeopardized by a unilateral decree. This top-down coercive execution meant that instead of fighting the systematic problem of academic neglect together as a unified community, Carter forced a bitter civil war within Richmond, facing physical threats, vandalism at his local businesses, and intense public condemnation because he chose the path of a sudden shock therapy rather than transparent, incremental intervention. Finally, Carter's early leadership methodology made the critical mistake of treating his players as a uniform monolith, rather than accounting for the vast, individualized socioeconomic and psychological differences within his locker room. In his initial push for absolute order, his rigid adherence to the 15-page contract did not leave room for nuanced realities of teenagers living in an environment plagued by systemic poverty, domestic instability, and trauma. For a student dealing with immediate survival pressures outside of school, a sudden penalty of running extra suicides or being denied floor time for a minor administrative infraction could easily feel less like constructive discipline and more like institutional rejection. By initially prioritizing rigid autocratic compliance over individualized consideration, Carter came dangerously close to alienating the very students who were most vulnerable to dropping out or slipping into the temptations of the street economy. It was only through his subsequent grueling hours spent alongside the boys in the school library, where he was forced to pivot and provide deep, individualized mentorship, that he managed to salvage the psychological buy-in of the team. This ultimately saved his leadership experiment from collapsing under the weight of his own dogmatic friction, illustrating that while his vision was noble, his initial execution relied on an unsustainable level of unilateral friction that risked sacrificing his players' futures for the sake of the unyielding principle. What can we learn from Coach Carter? Coach Carter's leadership at Richmond High will remain a classic example of organizational psychology from all times to come, illustrating that changing a negative culture cannot be done without integrating efforts to motivate, influence, set goals, communicate, and build teams. Speaking about motivation, Coach Carter disregarded superficial, short-term, extrinsic motivations, such as winning trophies, and instead motivated his team intrinsically, linking the daily routines of each player to his or her self-respect and survival in the long run. Coach Carter influenced his students through idolized role modeling and pace setting. He never asked his players to sweat, study, or even wear a suit and tie on the court that he did not demonstrate on himself in a tailor-made suit every day at the library table. As for goal setting, Carter employed backward mapping from a distant vision into particular goals, such as a 2.3 GPA, where he'd put up a required 15-page contract. In doing so, Coach Carter made sure that his expectations would be clearly understood by linking everyday behavioral objectives with concrete criteria of obtaining a Division I scholarship from the NCAA. Although there were some issues with Carter's initial communication through his autocratic isolation, which kept the parents and the school board unaware of the situation during the lockout period, it eventually proved successful due to his radical consistency and clarity in communicating, as well as his readiness to conduct difficult and risky negotiations instead of giving it to the public demands. Finally, Carter's team building was brilliantly done through the destruction of personal egos and the cultivation of collective responsibilities by using common difficulties such as rigorous physical training and collective responsibility measures to integrate a group of teenagers into a protective brotherhood. Thus, all these aspects combined taught the important lesson that effective leadership is more than managing people's performance. It is radically improving their self-concept to allow them to make wise choices on their own. My personal reflection. Question 1. Which leadership qualities do you admire most? Transformational leadership and leading from behind are the qualities I admire the most. You won't find a good coach who leads from behind. They have to have gone through what they put players through, in most cases at least. Obviously, the world is a lot softer now. Carter would be extremely criticized if he was coaching today. He is too hard on players, and his contracts would be seen as unnecessary and too harsh. Question 2. What qualities would I like to develop? Based off of Coach Carter and the fact that I would like to coach sports one day, like basketball, some qualities I need to develop are leading from in front, transformational leadership, and confidence. Question 3. What lessons can I apply to my own life? Some lessons that I can currently apply are accountability, courage, and willingness to be a villain if it means I'm following morals. This would mean that I take accountability for every action I have. I have courage in what I do, and I can be the bad guy if I'm following my morals. Some lessons I can apply later in life, say if I were to go on to coach a football team, or lead from in front, so don't put the players through anything I haven't done or wouldn't do. And transformational leadership, meaning try to make them better people and students, not just better players. Question 4. How has this project changed your understanding of leadership? This project has changed my understanding by showing me what a good leader looks like. Of course, Carter was not perfect, but he's the closest thing I've seen to perfect in coaching. I would go as far to say that Carter is even the best high school basketball coach ever. Not the most successful necessarily, but the best. Maybe it's just because high school coaches aren't as famous as professional college coaches, so they don't have the publicity that NBA coaches have. but I still think he's the best high school coach ever. If given the chance, would I choose to follow this leader? Yes, for sure, 100%. I mean, he took a team that was failing the previous season, failing classes, not winning very many games, to a 13-0 start of the season, and made his players better people at the same time. He makes a great coach, and if he had future NBA players in Richmond, I think he would have been even more successful in the seasons there. But I would like to play for him because of his morals more than his success. How he wants to make you a better person, better student, before he makes you a better basketball player. Now, he didn't make it easy. He didn't make it an easy path. Instead, he wanted to shatter mediocrity by making the athletes better people. He didn't care about the team record first. That was his afterthought. He wanted to make you better people, more coachable and respectable, and hopefully they would win at the same time. Thank you for listening to this podcast, the very first episode of the Vipond Vibe. If you liked it, give me a good grade on the assignment. Thank you for your time and for listening, and hopefully give me a good grade. And I will hopefully not do this again.
Get your money, man. Life goes
So
on.
I'm hopeful, yes I am hopeful for today. Take this music and use it. Let it take you away and be hopeful, hopeful, and he'll make a